for being here with us. Pat and Stu for Glenn. 888-727-BECK if you want to get involved in the show today. And happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. Stu happens to be completely decked out in green. Well, a green sweater. Eagles sweater.
I have lots of green stuff. As an Eagles fan, that's the one benefit you get.
Yeah.
You pretty much are wearing green anyway.
I almost wore my Green Bay Packers shirt, but didn't pull the trigger.
No.
So.
And you're Irish.
But it is green, and I'm Irish, but I'm wearing blue for some reason. Anyway, it looks like Governor Gavin Newsom's on some pretty slippery footing right now. He's on thin ice, and we'll get into that, tell you what's going on there, coming up in about 60 seconds.
The Glenn Beck Program.
There's a group of people out there who are just waiting to get their filthy claws on as much of your money as they possibly can. They have no scruples, no morals, and they'll rob you blind the moment you let your guard down. Shockingly, I'm not talking about the government this time, but I am talking about a group of people who are almost as bad, cyber criminals. It's important to understand how cybercrime and identity theft can affect your life. Every day we put our information at risk on the internet, and you never know from one day to the next when it's going to be your turn to have your identity stolen. That's why LifeLock is so important. It helps you monitor a ton more than you can keep track of on your own. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses, but you can keep what's yours with LifeLock Identity Theft Protection. Join now and save up to 25% off your first year at LifeLock.com with the promo code BECK. 25%, you got to do this. 800-LifeLock or head to LifeLock.com and use the promo code BECK for 25% off.
Hey, in California, they hit the desired 2 million goal, right, on the recall petition. I think you have to have 2,000 or 2 million confirmed names.
Well, no,
Isn't
technically
it?
it's only 1.5 million.
Oh, okay.
But they wanted to get to 1.8 to 2 million because they wanted to have a little bit of leeway.
And now they have that.
Yeah, they're well above it. They were at 2.06 million, and this is a couple days ago now. Which is pretty amazing.
That's an impressive recall effort.
Considering especially that they did it in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, people weren't allowed to go out. I mean, the governor was able to repress this effort for much of it because, you know, he was not letting people out of their houses. California wasn't even letting people go to the beach for part of this time. So how would you sign a petition? How would you get this going?
The only place you could go was to that French restaurant, the French Laundry. And the only way you could go there is if you were the governor of the state.
Really?
Or one of his close personal friends.
Is that how it worked?
That's how it worked. Yeah, everybody else had to stay home.
I really think that's the difference between this working and not working is that dinner.
Well, it is.
It had a really good...
That kicked everything into gear.
The guys who were behind this worked their butts off to get this done, but it was an impossible effort in the middle of a pandemic. How can you do it?
And doing it to a Democrat in California, that doesn't work out.
Very, very hard, right? Gray Davis was 2003.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago. These things normally fail. Several against Gavin Newsom had failed already. And they stepped up and they worked really hard and they did a great job. But I don't know, without that dinner, I don't know if it would have worked.
I don't think it would have. I think that was the last straw for an awful lot of Californians.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, I mean, I liked that guy. I liked his policies, but I'm sorry. The do as I say, not as I do thing, I can't go there with him.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating for people because I think people went into this pandemic and they said, look, this is a crazy situation. It's something none of us have ever dealt with before, unless you were alive in 1918. And this is something that it's very, very difficult to deal with. And we understood at some level things were going to change for a time, right? That doesn't mean that we were going to endorse full out lockdowns. But I think a lot of us were fine with, let's cut down the big parties. Let's stay away from each other a little bit more. Maybe let's wash our hands a little more often, whatever those steps were. But when you say we're going to lock down all of society, based on a complete lie, I mean, and I don't mean a lie like the coronavirus is a lie. I mean, the lie that Gavin Newsom specifically used to justify the recall was completely insane, and to this day holds up as insane. John Ziegler was on my show, Stu Does America, last night, and he went over this, and I had forgotten because really one of the first states, I think it was the first to really shut down, was California, and it was done based on this ridiculous lie that something like 60% of all Californians would have the coronavirus in 8 weeks. And that did not happen.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, in fact, not only did it not happen, it still hasn't happened. I mean, it happened in 8 weeks, but it hasn't happened in 52 weeks either. I mean, no state in the union has had 60% of its population infected with coronavirus. I mean, this just didn't happen. And he was using it as a scare tactic to try to get assistance and to scare people. And it was really way over the top. I mean, it's not even close. I think something like 3.6 million have tested positive in California, it's the most in the country. It's a big state, a lot of people in it.
That's probably about 8% of their population.
I don't know what let's see if I can find his. He has the stats in his article. We'll tweet it at Stu Does America.
What are there? 40 million? I think there's 40 million residents of California, right? 40, 42 million, somewhere in there.
It's amazing, right? And so this guy comes out and he justifies this based on a lie. Then he holds everyone down, and he does the thing where, again, people in March and April were much more, okay, I understand this is a tough time. You're taking big steps. I'm not comfortable with them, but okay, until we get a handle on this. For example, until we at least have testing, that if I feel sick, I can go and get a test, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, you can do these things. Then it comes to this period where there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of the virus out there for months and months, and he's still not letting people go to the beach and the park. I mean, the lockdowns that Newsom did were completely different than they were. Lockdown gets totally overused in this conversation because it seems to mean both Texas has a mask mandate and Gavin Newsom won't let anyone go to school, right? Like these are totally different standards. So you have to kind of look at this and say, this has been an overreaction from Newsom for a claim that was not even close to accurate. And now we stand back and we look at this and we say, wow, he needs to be held accountable. And I think that's what this recall does. It at least gives the people of California a chance to say, oops, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. I mean, as if his other actions in his life do not already tell you that you should not have him as your governor. I don't know how. Again, it's California. Weird things happen. But at least this will give California a chance. Now, do I have faith if they do recall Gavin Newsom? Because it looks like it's going to be on the ballot for sure. If it does happen, then will it work? I don't know. They may still keep him in office.
Do we know when the election would be held if it happens? Do they don't wait clear till November, do they?
No, it happens faster.
They'll have a special election.
I talked to Mike Netter, who's the one of the guys running it, and he told me it's definitely before November. I don't remember the exact date, but it's interesting. Newsom has gone this entire time not discussing it. Media organizations would call him up and say, "Hey, what do you think about this recall? What do you think about it? What does this say about your governorship?" He would just not respond. No comment. No comment until yesterday, basically. And yesterday, he started taking all sorts of interviews because he's realized this is happening, and now he has to fight it. Mm-hmm. And so he went on with Jake Tapper yesterday. He talked to Tapper, went after him pretty hard. He talked to Tapper about the recall, and really his first extended public comments. Listen.
You have people that are part of the lead coalition that started this petition that are avid Proud Boy members. They're part of the 3 Percenters, the right-wing militia group. They are supporters of QAnon conspiracy theorists, white supremacist groups. That's not just that's factual. And so at the end of the day, that's the origins of this. And you combine that with Newt Gingrich and Mike Huckabee and Devin Nunes, and now the RNC nationalizing this recall, time and money, you're going to get something on the ballot.
Well, what do you think of the 2 million or so Californians who have signed it, who signed this petition? I'm not talking about the leaders that you just went after. Certainly all 2 million Californians who signed this aren't all Trumpsters.
Yeah, that's
right.
Very, very
good
true. And look, this has been one of those things that I don't think they could have done this in a pandemic, particularly without a bunch of Democrats on board. Certainly tons of independents have signed this. And, we've talked to the organizers. They have tons of Democratic signatures as well. This is a very bipartisan thing. It crosses the line because, look, Democrats own businesses too. Democrats have jobs. I mean, it's not common, but Democrats have jobs too. And people are pissed off about this, especially when they see the hypocrisy.
And I love that he blames prominent Republicans. Like, they're all powerful.
Yeah.
Like, it's these super powerful Republicans that are to blame for this. Really? It's these feckless Republicans that you're going to blame? They've got no power.
They couldn't even win elections in Georgia.
Right. And you're saying that they're responsible for changing the political landscape in California? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. By the way, the actual promise from Gavin Newsom was he wrote to Donald Trump, and he said, in the next 8 weeks, more than 25 million Californians, and there's 40 million residents, as you point out, Pat, 25 million would get the virus. As of this week, 3.6 million had it.
25 million
in 8 weeks
is what he predicted.
Now, look, lots of people said things that were wrong in this era.
Huh,
but,
really?
Yeah, a lot of people did.
Fauci. Who else would have, Anthony Fauci, might have been inaccurate on almost every Fauci thing that he said.
Well,
Dr. Fauci.
Yes, I know. Yes, you could definitely find tons of Dr. Fauci things that he's been.
Well, he's
wrong
only
on.
taken both sides of an issue on everything. That's all.
But it wasn't just Dr. Fauci. I mean,
no, it wasn't.
I will say there was a poll that came out 1 year ago today. 55% of Americans believe there would be less than 1,000 deaths from the coronavirus.
I was among them, I think.
Probably. I think a lot of people were.
Yeah, I think
and it was
among them.
87% of Americans believed it would be less than 10,000.
Has it been more? Is it
yeah,
more than that?
Yeah, it's been a tad more.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was, look, this was a totally different world at that point.
Yeah.
But only 13% of Americans even were remotely close to what was going to happen. And that was in mid-March. That wasn't like January where like you'd really have in January, I probably would have said nobody in the United States would die from it. This is a very widely held viewpoint that nothing was going to happen. I mean, a lot of people believed it. But also, there was people on the other side just as insane. I mean, this is completely absurd. It has happened literally nowhere in the world, what he's talking about. It did not happen. It never was going to happen. And he shut the state down based on this idea that was completely wrong. And I still think the American people and people in California would forgive that if it wasn't for the hypocrisy on top of it. I think they would say, look, it was a tough time. People didn't know. People will make excuses for their leaders, especially in their local leaders. They don't like the national people. They don't like people in other states. They don't like other congressional districts. But they tend to reelect their people over and over and over and over again because people, I don't know, maybe tend to side with their own guy. But in this case, when you're seeing this guy, especially, it wasn't like he was indoors at In-N-Out Burger, with his kids. He's at the French Laundry, one of the most fancy restaurants in America, and also sitting there indoors without a mask with other health officials. It wasn't just him and his friends. He was sitting there with the leaders of the California Health Department.
Right. Yeah, it's bizarre and blatant. And yeah, I think that turned the tide. 888-727-BECK. It's Pat and Stu for Glenn today.
So what are you spending every month on your cell phone bill? Is it more than you'd like it to be? More importantly, maybe, I don't know, do you know what the cell phone company you've got your service through is actually doing with the money you're giving them every month? These aren't the most fun questions to ask yourself, but you should ask them, especially when there are really good options. Why would you be paying through the nose to a company like Verizon, who's setting some of your hard-earned money to fund things like Planned Parenthood, when you could be getting the exact same service on the exact same towers through a company that's going to charge you a lot less and which doesn't donate money to leftist causes? That company, of course, Patriot Mobile. Switching is easy. They have customizable plans. They can, do all the stuff you need done with your cell phone. You're gonna get the great service and the great data plans and all that stuff. But they actually donate to conservative causes. They stand up for what you believe in. The choice is clear. This month, get free Premier activation, where they set up the phone for you. All of it's done, and you get a special gift with the offer code Beck. The same service, a lower price, and the values you believe in. Go to patriotmobile.com/Beck. It's patriotmobile.com/Beck, or call them 972-PATRIOT. 972-PATRIOT for Patriot Mobile. 10 seconds, station ID.
So the Tapper interview of Gavin Newsom, I think there was more that he had to say, right? Or is this a separate interview? Is this the same one? This is okay. Is. Mm-hmm. This is where I think the View's Meghan McCain was giving Newsom the latest stats between Florida and California in the COVID pandemic.
Well, Governor, news outlets like the AP are pointing out that California and Florida have virtually identical case rates, even though California's had strict rules and Florida's essentially been wide open. Mm-hmm. Florida also has a booming economy, a booming real estate market, and much lower unemployment rate than California, 4.8% compared to 9%. I also have to point out that California has the lowest percentage of kids in schools and the 7th worst mortality rate. I'd much rather live in Florida than California right now. How do you explain that?
Well, our positivity rate is 3 times less than Florida at the current moment. We have a lower death rate than Florida. We have a lower case rate than Florida. In this pandemic, the story still needs to be told. But that said, let's be just candid about this. Florida and California are very different in every way, shape, or form. In this respect, most importantly, the issue of density is profoundly significant as it relates to the disease spread, the disease burden, particularly multi-generational households and density. Just consider just L.A. alone. Its density is 7 times greater than that of Miami. And so I'm not here to critique other states. Quite the contrary, save one, and that was Texas, that notably, I think, made a terrible, reckless mistake on setting down the gauntlet on removing masks, not implementing strategies to enforce and be more aggressive on mask wearing. And at the same time, I think what we've done is save lives.
Wow.
Oh, my God. There's so much wrong with that clip. Oh, so much wrong with that clip. By the way, just in case you wonder, we did a show last night on ranking the top 5. Well, we did all 50 states, but the best 5 states, the worst 5 states, and just results. Like not about like what we think should work. Mm-hmm. And for California didn't do well. We can get into that here in a second. But when it comes just to density, that was one of the factors we factored into the formula. California is the 12th most dense state in America. Florida's 9th. So the state is actually more dense than California.
More dense.
Now
even that argument was ridiculous.
Yeah, he's pointing to one city, city comparison and saying it's more dense, which, I don't have that in front of me. I assume he's right on that, but who knows with Gavin Newsom. But I mean, the state as a whole is more dense in Florida.
The other thing that's interesting about that and California to Florida comparison, there are far more senior citizens in Florida than California. Everybody retires to Florida.
Florida's the 5th oldest state in the union, and California is the 43rd oldest state in the union.
So that's a huge difference right there.
Huge difference. I mean,
a much bigger vulnerable population than California has.
Exactly. And that's a big, big difference. I didn't even know it was that wide. 5th and 43rd.
Wow.
So, look, Gavin Newsom does not have an argument here. He was able to. He does have better numbers. I mean, really, the better comparison would be like a New York or something. Where he does have better numbers than a New York, where they had that really bad outbreak. Mm-hmm. But you can't. It's very difficult to argue that lockdown measures like they took in California can be justified. They're not. They just didn't work. And California really went crazy with this, doubled and tripled down on it. And, the economy got hit pretty hard.
And it's bizarre how he goes after Texas at the end of that thing when Texas has way better numbers than California does. And now he's lashing out because the mandate's been removed, but nobody said you can't wear a mask. In fact, what I've noticed is really nothing's changed in Texas as far as mask wearing. Have you noticed any difference?
No, nothing.
Every time I go into a grocery store, everybody's masked up. Everybody. I see no one walking around grocery stores without a mask.
It is interesting. Now, as you may know, my wife, Lisa Page, and she features this on her Instagram page over and over again, is possibly the most prominent anti-mask activist in the United States. And she will go, even before the mask mandate was over, would just walk in. Now, again, we've already had the virus, so it's really stupid for us to be wearing masks. But she will go anywhere. And, most of the time, I think that the formula is pretty static, which is, and this is before the mask mandate and after the mask mandate. In most places, if you walk in without a mask, you'll get some looks. Occasionally, someone will talk to you that's a customer. But the stores themselves are not going to hammer you over it typically.
Yeah.
Maybe that's improving a little bit. I've seen a couple places that have taken the mask signs down, but still, as you point out, everyone inside is still wearing them.
Yep.
So I don't know. Doesn't
Nothing's
seem to make
changed.
much of a difference. Yeah. We have more on that in a moment. Maybe we'll go through some of these states here in a second. We'll see where your state ranked.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Spring is back, which in Texas means that the birds are singing for the week or so they have before the weather gets hot enough that they just fall dead out of the sky, fully cooked and ready to eat. And while that's a fine way to get a meal around here, I want to tell you about a better way. It's called RecTech, and it's about to change the way you see grilling. The RecTech is sturdy, made from stainless steel, the way it should be. Smart grill technology not only allows you to control the whole cooking process from an app on your phone or device, but also automatically adjusts itself to the weather around. So if it starts raining outside, for example, the RecTech will raise or lower the necessary heat to give you the perfect temperature all the way through. When you own a RecTech, you basically own cooking perfection. Follow RecTech on all social media and sign up for their newsletter. It's RecTech with a Q at the end, RecTeq.com. Especially when it gets really hot in the summer, or if you're up north and it's still pretty cold, you can grill outside because you can use an app on your phone to control the entire process. RecTeq.com is the place to go. RecTeq.com. Make sure you have the best grill on the market. RecTeq.com. RecTeq.com.
Won't you check out my show, Pat Gray Unleashed, every weekday from 7 to 9 Eastern, 6 to 8 Central, or anywhere you get your podcasts anytime you want during the day. It's Pat and Stu for Glenn today, 888-727-BECK. All right, some statistics that may or may not surprise you, but Stu has a list of the states that are doing the best right now with COVID, and also states that are doing the worst.
And I would say this is a look at the entire year, right? So it's not just where they are right now. Moment.
It's
how do they do over the past year?
Yeah.
And so we went through, did a formula there. Let me give you some of the factors that went into this. One, obviously, how well did you avoid people dying in your state? You know what I mean? Like, that's obviously a big factor. But number two, I mean, this because we hear from the news media is trying to compare death totals and everything else. We also looked at the economy. How well were you able to protect the economy through this?
Okay.
It was a really difficult thing for states to do. Some states did a lot better than others. We also looked at what is from, there's an University of Oxford Stringency Index, which is basically a measure of how hard the government cracked down. How long did they put the people into relative shutdown levels, right? Did they have a light touch? Did they have a heavy touch when it comes to that? And I think that's somewhat controversial in that, like, people would say, well, what does that matter? I think, like, if you have two states that had the same results with the economy and deaths, right? But one gave you complete freedom, the other one locked you down in individual plastic bubbles.
That matters.
Yeah, that matters, right? I mean, This is it's the United States of America here. So I use that as a factor. Those are the three biggest factors. However, there's also, we factored in the age of the population. So a state that has an older population should get a break in comparing the death rate, to a state that has a younger population. Same thing with density. If you have a state with a population density that's high. We looked at vaccine rollout, all sorts of different things, and kind of came up with a final score 0 to 100 for all 50 states. So let me give you some of the bottom states. I'll start 7th from the bottom for a reason, because it was California. Score of 35.7 out of 100. They actually didn't do terribly as far as the rate of COVID, but as we point out, they have a relatively young population in California. So that does make a difference as far as the death rate, but we factored that in. They finished 7th from the bottom. 6th from the bottom was Massachusetts, 28.1 out of 100. 5th from the bottom, Connecticut, our old home state, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, can you blame some of its neighbors for this? I think you could.
Yes.
But Connecticut also didn't do all that well. Rhode Island is 4th from the bottom. 25.2 is the score out of 100. 3rd from the bottom, red state, Louisiana. 20.6 out of 100. Now, you can probably fairly note that part of the reason Louisiana had a really bad outbreak of COVID was
Mardi Gras.
Mm-hmm. Which happened at the end of February last year, and of course was held in a very blue area of Louisiana, not a very red area of Louisiana. But, as long as you have New Orleans in your state, you're responsible for it. Louisiana, I apologize for that, but I didn't put it in your state. That was your thing. So you're responsible for the outbreak in New Orleans. So they came out 3rd to worst, 20.6 out of 100. Then there's quite a drop off from 3rd to worst at 20.6 to 2nd to worst. New Mexico, 7.9 out of 100.
Wow.
So from 20.6 to 7.9. People don't realize that New Mexico had the hardest lockdown in the nation. Harder than any other state. California, New York, nobody locked down harder than New Mexico.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They had their economy was a disaster as well. They didn't even get good results as far as COVID. They didn't do anything well throughout this entire process. So New Mexico finishes 2nd to last, and in dead last place, without anyone's surprise, of course, is New York with a score of 6.8 out of 100. They had the second strongest lockdown in the country. Despite that, had the second worst COVID numbers, only to New Jersey, which is completely New York's fault anyway. Mm-hmm. And also their economy was a disaster. Despite the fact they have a giant industry there that could work from home, they still couldn't protect the economy at all. So they finish in dead last place. Of course, Andrew Cuomo is awful.com should be noted at this time. Shall we give you some of the top picks?
Yeah. Who did the best?
Let's see. All right. Well, who did the best?
And we're starting at
9, 10. Let me give you 10.
All right.
Alaska, number 10, score of 66.7. Again, we take into account population density. But again, there's some asterisks in this, like Hawaii. What do you do with it? Hawaii obviously is going to have a really good result on COVID because they're an island, but also a really bad result on the economy because they're dependent on flights. Yeah. So it's a tough one to measure, but Alaska came in 10th, South Dakota in 9th. And I think a lot of people would think South Dakota would do really well on this. They were number 2 on the stringency index. So it's the second least amount of time in lockdown. But they're 44th as far as COVID per million. So that hurt them. Like they had a very open attitude towards this, which I respect, and I like Kristi Noem quite a bit. But look, they just had a really rough battle with that when it comes to their rates. 8th place, Nebraska, 67.8 out of 100. Then Virginia actually did pretty well. In 7th place, 68.9. Iowa in 6th place, 69.9 out of 100. Iowa, another one that they had that initial shutdown period and then were pretty open after that and had relatively good results, certainly good economic results. Number 5, Oregon.
That's a surprise.
That one is a surprise to me. And I was thinking about this because the score is 70.1 out of 100 for Oregon. Again, best COVID results by state for the entire year. They had they had very low rates of COVID, but they locked down. I mean, they were middle of the pack when it comes down to how long they locked down. My theories on this was, one, Portland in particular was burning down most of the year, so probably people were terrified to go outdoors at all and see anyone. Plus, you also have and their economy did relatively well compared to some of these other more lockdown type states. And I think you might have a population that was more able to work from home. The industries there are friendlier to being able to work at home, so there wasn't as much of a need for that. But that's where that finished. Number 4, Idaho, 74.1 score out of 100. Idaho did pretty much everything pretty well. Every one of their categories was pretty good. Not at the top of the list, but in the top third on pretty much every single thing. A couple of surprises here towards the top here. Number 3, and there's an asterisk on this one a little bit too. Number 3 was Wisconsin. And I would think Wisconsin, how the heck, really? They have a Democratic governor. Yet they ranked on this, how long did they lock down the stringency index? They were only 5th. They were somehow 5th. Now, I looked into that a little bit more, thinking, how the hell did Wisconsin finish 5th in this measure? Because it's really the strongest thing that they had going for them in this, in the little formula here. And the reason was the courts kept overturning all the things the Democratic governor wanted to do. So they never, they were on and off again a little bit, but the courts were like, no, you can't do any of this crap. So they didn't go into lockdown as much as a lot of other blue states did, which is kind of an interesting factor. Score of 83.9 out of 100. Number 2, New Hampshire, 84.9 out of 100.
Wouldn't have guessed that one either.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. Although you got live free or die, right?
Yeah.
They did not lock down all that hard. They had pretty good results from COVID, and their economy was relatively well protected. They are also an older population, which helps them in this measure. I mean, considering they were 8th overall in death rate and had the second oldest population in the country, it's pretty impressive that stuck together. And it kind of makes sense in some ways. It's a state that has a motto where you're supposed to be taking responsibility for your own actions, and maybe that helped play in. Number 1, though, are you ready? Score of 90.1 out of 100.
I am.
90.1 out of 100, the number 1 score in the entire union. This was a surprise to me. I will say I didn't see this one coming. Number 1, the state of... Does this end or...
Confusion? The state of confusion? No. Okay. The state of...
Utah!
That is what I was going to guess.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to guess.
That's pretty interesting to me. I would not have guessed it.
Really?
Just because, I don't know. I mean, it didn't get any press. People talk, the right has talked about Texas. They've talked about Florida. They talked about Arizona. They talked about South Dakota. They've talked about a lot of different states. Georgia got press at the beginning quite a bit. Really, I haven't heard much conversation about Utah. But Utah kind of sat there and did incredibly well in every measure here. Number 3, as far as how long were they in lockdown? 3rd least amount of time. So they were 3rd, say, on the Freedom Index, right?
Okay.
Economy, they finished 7th in the entire country. And their COVID results, they finished 6th.
Wow.
So really now I will say they are the youngest state in the union, which I did not know either until doing this research. Youngest state in the union. However, that they get punished in this measure for that. Like if you're a young state, you lose points on the formula because you shouldn't. An older state has a tougher time with something like this.
Yeah.
So even despite the fact that they got punished for that, still finished number 1 in the union with a score of 90.1.
Wow.
And really has had no press and no credit and no love. I mean, I haven't heard anybody saying, wow, who's doing a good job is Utah. And this comes back to something I think has proved since the beginning of this to be really important. We've talked so much about what the government does. Am I going to sit here and say that everything that Utah did from the government level was right? I doubt it. I mean, I don't know all the details. I don't live in Utah, but I guarantee if we open up the phone lines, we get lots of people complaining about what the government was saying or doing in Utah, as we would from every state. But like, there's something to do with this coming back to, instead of the government, the people. You know, this is the United States of America. We lead the government. The government doesn't lead us. That's not the way this works. And, you know, if you look at the type of population you'd want to potentially have in the time of a pandemic, I got to say, you might draft Mormons number one. You might. First of all, they're pretty healthy. Mm-hmm. Second of all, as you point out, pretty young.
Yeah.
I would say they do a good job following rules. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
I would say that's pretty accurate.
Like, they're not like the type of people who are like going to, you know, they're not like people who are going to go out and, like, you know, burn down government buildings because they don't like a policy. They're going to argue with it. And they're going to say what they believe, but they're not going to do that.
They're not activists.
Yeah, they're not like, and I think that's, you know, I mean that in a good way in this particular measure specifically. And then also, there are people who tend to do a lot of thinking about others. Right? Like, they're much, I would say, less focused on, like, well, damn it, it's my right, than, you know what, like, I don't like this, but I don't want to make anyone else sick. I want to make sure that, like, I think there's a very selfless aspect of that culture that makes a state like Utah perform really well. And I will note too, number 4 was Idaho.
Yes, also quite Mormon.
Mm-hmm. And that it's an interesting thing, and I think that it comes down to that a little bit more than cable news and even talk shows and politicians have talked about. You just mentioned this with the masks. The government policy has been such a factor, but really, I mean, you look at the states with no mask mandates and compare them to the ones with mask mandates. There's about a 10 to 12% difference of mask usage. It's really not that different.
Yeah.
It really doesn't make all that much difference. It's really about what the people wind up doing. We lead this government. They don't lead us.
So would this be a good time to send the couple of guys in white shirts and bicycles over to your house? Seems like a pretty good time maybe for that. I'll make the call. I'll make the call while you do the commercial.
I have COVID. They can't come over. All right. So when you want to really get your groove on. I know Pat is he was just singing in the break. Man. This guy, you want to talk about
getting your groove on.
Huge dancer. Mm-hmm. I always see Pat walking around here in a pair of Raycons and just jamming.
I do love my Raycons.
The Raycons are awesome, man.
I love them.
Yeah, I will say, if you've ever had like either the Apple earbuds or some of these other brands that are wireless, especially if you have the wires, those are really annoying now because I'm totally used to the wireless ones. But the Apple ones, they hang down from your ears. They look like weird earrings. They bump into things and fall out all the time.
These are way cooler looking.
Way cooler.
And they don't hurt. The other ones hurt my ears. I don't know why, but the Raycon don't at all.
No, they fit your ear perfectly.
Yeah.
And they fit, if you can picture this, flat against your ear. So you could put your head down on a pillow if you wanted to and listen to an audiobook at night and have no problems whatsoever. The best fit, they won't fall out of your ears like a lot of earbuds do. They have the volume, the clarity of sound of all the major competitors, but they're half the price. We should mention that as well, of a pair of Apple iPods. Raycon's offering 15% off all their products right now. Here's what you got to do to get it. Go to buyraycon.com/Beck, B-U-Y, then R-A-Y-C-O-N, buyraycon.com/Beck, 15% off at buyraycon.com/Beck.
So where did Texas wind up in these rankings, Stu?
Texas did not do all that well. They were, let's say, I'm going to say 38th, 39th out of 51. We included
that's not
DC.
very good.
No, not very good. The biggest problem with Texas was the economy, actually. They had a bigger drop-off in the economy. Maybe chalk that up to energy. I mean, you had a lot less flying, obviously, but, air
less
travel.
Places,
so maybe that was the reason for it. But they did not do well in the economy. We're 8th in the sort of freedom index, but 42nd in the economy, middle of the pack for COVID. Florida was another one I think people were interested in. Florida finished right in the middle of the pack overall. So they were actually in lockdown a lot longer than people remember. They came out, they removed the mask mandate early, but we're in lockdown a lot longer than people remember. Did middle of the pack kind of on everything. But again, with a bigger population, there's reasons to understand why that could be possible. I don't know if there's any other huge ones. I mean, the bottom's very blue, I'll say. Pennsylvania was down there. New Jersey was down there. Nevada, Illinois. All kind of down there towards the bottom, which I guess you'd expect because they had bad outbreaks and locked down harshly.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.